kick off. Please correct me, I'm correct. We are starting on session 4, which is publications. It is correct. Is our 4th session? It is correct. Okay, great. So, publications. What we'll go through this evening. So, publication and a bit about drawing instruments. Nautical charts and publications. Note the word nautical charts and not the word maps. Please, guys, remember we spoke about it. What information is shown on charts, chart symbols, and representation of distance and direction. Then we'll look at the publications in common use. If we had to do all the nautical publications, it would take us hours, and it really isn't relevant to us. But a bit on chart correction, just so that you can recognize it and see it. And then a little bit about drawing instruments, parallel rules, dividers, priority plotting instruments, things like that. So, charts and publications. What are nautical charts and publications? And to be specific, they are documents and maps, charts, and hence the inverted commas, specifically for the marine environment. Okay, they are only aimed at us on the water, and they are specifically published by a government authority or an authority given by a government, and that authority is handed directly down from the IMO. And the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, is a worldwide treaty that governs the high seas and all navigable waters therewith. So publications that aren't done by an authority in our country, for instance, SAMHSA, or SAS can do it on behalf of SAMHSA within the recreational field. So if you've got or obviously the South African Navy in this country. In the UK, it's done by the Admiralty and then by the RYA in the recreational field. So, and so on and so forth, Australian government, the US Coast Guard. Don't pick up a chart and use it trustworthily unless it is specifically published by a government. Okay? They are not your reference books. So they're not the nice books that we read for, you know, learning and that sort of thing, teaching aids. These aren't published by a marine authority, and they might well be inaccurate. I have got a set of teaching aids, which I use for exactly this reason, that have, for a towing vessel, 3 different lights displayed. So these are 3 training aids, all displaying different lights for the same thing. So don't trust these training aids. Trust the government ones. Okay, charts are marine maps. We all know what they look like. Look something like this. But there are some specifics that I want to go into with them. So, they're published by a government authority. They will have a crest on them. A government crest, whether it's a naval crest or Admiralty crest or the South African government, it will have a crest on it. Okay? And they contain basic information for safe passage making. Note the word safe passage making. Okay? And the charts are then detailed in a certain area. These charts originate from usually one or other's navy, wandering around these specific seas and doing depth soundings. They were done at a certain time and date. So if you, for instance, now get hold of a nice brand new chart of the Mozambique coastline, and you're going to go from Richards Bay north, be very, very aware that that chart soundings were done in the 1960s. There's a lot of sandbanks out there and they move. So you need to know what information you're looking at. Okay? Older charts might well still have depth in fathoms. Note what depths you're looking at. Okay? Note the scale of the chart and then the type of projection. Mercator is the most common. That's the flattened world. Last week we spoke about where Latin long comes from. That's the flattened version of the world. Gnomic projection has actually got a curved Latin long on it. Okay. Very importantly, the dates. That was why I mentioned the Mozambique coast. When was this published? Okay. So this was published, this is a chart of Cape Town. It was published in Cape Town on the 15th of May, 1981. That's a while back. Not much has changed there. We can agree with that. But note that that chart was published in 1981. But are there updates? Yes. In the book called The Notice to Mariners, you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner of a chart, there's a bunch of dates and pages. And those should all be written on the chart as updates. That's the chart updating we're talking about. So although it's still the 1981 print, they have published updates and they're actually displayed on the chart. So be aware of updates on a chart. Okay, all charts will have a compass rose or multiple, dependent on the magnetic variation in the area. Now in Cape Town, we have a 25, 26 degree magnetic variation. So that can make a very, very big difference to your course. If you want to go due north from Cape Town, say up into Langebaan Lagoon, and you haven't taken your magnetic variation into account, you're going to go wandering off into the Atlantic. Worse off, if you're coming from there down, you're going to hit, well, Bock Point or at least the Atlantic coast, seaboard coast somewhere. Okay? These are specific to the area that your chart is on. If you look at the West Coast chart, there's actually one around Cape Town and there's one further north near Langebaan. They have two of them. Every chart will have an Atlantic, a magnetic variation compass rose for that area. Okay, every chart will have a chart number and edition number. You can see the two circled down here. You can order charts by their number. That's South African Navy number 118. Okay, it's Table Bay. That's no problem. We can recognize that. Okay, and the edition number. When was this edition published? Okay, so obviously if you're buying a chart, you want to make sure you're getting SAN 118, but the latest edition. If you're being handed on charts, and that's quite a common thing where people get handed charts passed on between boats and or people doing round the world trips, keep an eye on your editions. You might find them quite out of date. All charts will have a GPS type format. 90% of modern charts are WGS 84 positions, which means they can be plotted directly on your chart. Okay? But don't take it into as given that it will be WGS 84. Make sure you know what you're looking at. Otherwise, you could plot yourself in a position and you could well be in another position. So be wary of it. Where it's relevant in tidal areas, the chart could well have tidal diamonds and a tidal diamond table. That's this block at the top right here. And you can see there's a diamond and then lots of numbers below it. In one of the later episodes that we're going to go through, one of the later presentations, we'll actually do some tidal diamond work. So you get a little bit of practice at it. Okay. In non-tidal areas, you won't see that on a chart. There's obviously no tide that's relevant enough. So for instance, in the Baltic Sea where there's zero tidal, you won't see it at all. Okay, to go back to our compass rose, you see that there's a year of magnetic variation and a change. That's important information that we need to know. to calculate what is going on today. Okay, so that is another standard thing on every single chart. It doesn't necessarily display it like this. It might be displayed horizontally, but it will be displayed. And then obviously it's got details for safe passage making. So Cape Town, there's Cape Town Harbour, Table Bay, Robben Island, and then it gives you safe passage making information. I'm going to go back to scale here again. You'll notice it's only got 1 or 2 lights, and we know there's a whole bunch of buoys just outside Cape Town Harbour. Make sure you've got the right scale of chart. You get a bigger scale chart of this area, it will have all the buoys. It's very important to make sure you've got the right scale. And lastly, not all published charts, you can see this is an officially published chart, there's a crest, everything, are for navigation, not to be used for navigation. If you've got that on a chart, please do not use it for navigation. They do add and remove actual hazards. So don't use them. So they've got it in big letters directly below there. I mean, the fact that it's called an RYA training chart number 5 is a bit of a giveaway, but you can get one of Table Bay, False Bay for training here, which is a training chart only. Okay, chart symbols. Now we look at a chart, or any map for that matter, but we're talking about charts specifically. What are all these symbols mean? And how do we find them out? Okay. All charts have various symbols, and they all have details of relevance to safe passage making. They might well be a fish farm, or a buoy, or a light, or a something. We need to know what they are so that we can actually look at them. Okay. Firstly, go back to my scale again. If you're going into a small area, you want to have the smallest scale possible so you don't miss that there's actually 3 of these, not just 1. Inversely, if you're looking at electronic charts, they zoom in and out. Make sure you zoom far enough in to give all the detail you'll absolutely need for safe passage making. There's rather a famous error in that regard. Wouter Verbaak, he stuck Vestas wind onto an atoll at 32 knots. They literally didn't zoom in far enough to see that. And he sailed straight onto the island, or onto the atoll. And well, you can see they just ripped the boat to pieces, and that was the end of their race. And that's a Volvo Ocean Race crew making an error of scale. So it's not just novices who make these errors. I chatted to him after the fact, and he felt like a complete idiot, but you know, he should have. He rode into an island. It's probably the worst mistake a round the world navigator can make. Well, I hit an atoll. Okay, so interpreting our charts. Okay, so the first thing is we've got, that's what it looks like on the chart, the top section. And this is kind of a cross section 3-dimensionally, just to give you an idea. So the first thing we've got is above what we call mean high water spring, the yellow. Mean high water spring is the average high water spring height. It is not the highest high water spring. Then we've got chart datum, which is the lowest astronomical tide. That's as low as the sea has ever been recorded in that area. Okay. Then we've got contours. You can see here, there's the 5 meter, and here's a 10 meter. That is specific to that chart. It might be 2, 6. Make sure you note what the depth is on those contours. Next up, looking here again. So above mean high water spring, okay, we've got the coastline. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's connected to the coast. You can see here's a little piece out here. It's yellow. That's the color of these particular charts. It might be different color on a different chart manufacturer. Okay, then obviously the green piece here, that's your shoreline. Note that is the difference between chart datum and mean high water spring. So high water spring, that shoreline might have actually vanished completely to the human eye because the water's come up at high water. And then at low water, it might well look much bigger. Okay, but permanently dry land will appear on the chart as dry land. You see the zero ring around our little piece of dry land there? That is the difference between chart datum and that piece of dry land. So don't always assume there will be a piece of drawing, nice drawing like that. They've put that in as a contour as 0. So I don't think you can just sail over the blue bit and avoid the yellow because you can end up in trouble. Okay, then we got drying height. So you'll note that this is below chart datum, water springs, but above chart datum. So now you know there's a piece of land there that when the tide goes all the way out to its lowest ever, that piece of land will show. That doesn't mean to say it's going to be showing when you're out there. That might well be covered because the tide is in. It's showing that for tidal calculations and for you to be aware, this one and this one, that there is land underneath that piece of water if it's high water. Okay, and they give you drying heights. So you can calculate at high water how much we've got. A drying rock will just appear as a drying rock. You see that little star there? All the charts in the world use a star for a drying rock. A rock awash is a star with 4 dots. And then we've got unconfirmed soundings or depth soundings. So they're just a number. Lastly, the cross, oops, sorry, going to go back one. The cross here is a dangerous rock which is there below the water all the time. Navigational hazard. Okay, how do we know what these symbols mean? I mean, there's hundreds of them. Have a look at the screen in front of you. That one, or that one, or that one. What does that mean? I mean, that looks like a spaceship, doesn't it? There we got boats that sunk, but what is that one then? That looks like a boat that's still floating. How do we know what these things mean? What does that mean? Like a bar with lots of crosses in it. Remember, I said that these charts are published by government authorities all around the world. Not everybody uses the same symbols. Okay? They're not all the same. I mean, I can't imagine seeing a South African chart that says DIKE like that. But it'll be on it, it'll be in the right place to find out. So we find out each chart publisher will have a symbols and abbreviation. So this happens to be the Admiralty charts used on Admiralty paper charts. They say it's Admiralty specifically. Okay, we're looking for a symbols and abbreviations for the chart we're looking at. That goes right back to the beginning. Which government authority produces this chart? Whose symbols and abbreviations do I use? Okay, they also have a chart number and an edition number. So you can order the chart abbreviations by chart number and edition number. And they look something like this. So you'll have whatever the drawing is on your chart and a description. So I just happened to pick a dangers page, and it gives you what they are and a description. Whatever color they use, doesn't matter. It will all be detailed in their symbols and abbreviations. But they are specific to the chart publisher. Now, in a commercial vessel, you are required to carry the symbols and abbreviation for every type of chart you carry. So if you're carrying South African Navy, you have to carry South African Navy symbols and abbreviations. If you have Admiralty, you have to carry that book as well. It's actually a requirement. On recreational vessels, it's not a requirement to carry the book, but it is a requirement to have access to the book. In other words, if you're going in and out of Cape Town each time, you may keep one at home and have access to it. Or through the yacht club, for instance, they will carry them for you. On electronic charts, 99% of them, you just double click on whatever you don't know, and it'll normally have a description of what it is. So if it's a wreck, it'll often tell you some information about that wreck. Okay, so there's some major ones that you actually do need to know by heart as a skipper or a potential crew member. Rocks. I mentioned a rock below the waterline, and this is, there you see high water, there you can see low water. This is below chart datum. It's a cross. That is the same on every chart the world over. That's an IMO mandate. It may have a light little ring around it. That just says it's got a certain area. The cross is the main thing you're looking at. A rock awash at low water is a cross with the 4 dots. Same thing with a little ring. That is also mandated by IMO. What's interesting with this is that a rock awash at low water, it might well be 90% of the time below the water. Remember, this is the lowest astronomical tide. It's as shallow as it ever gets. And this is a rock visible above low water. Now you see at high water here, it's still not visible. We have a favorite rock in Cape Town called Vulcan Rock. It's actually just off Hype Bay, just outside Hype Bay Harbor. At high water, that rock disappears. The water around it is around 40 meters deep. If you don't know it's there and you haven't done your nav, you can very easily hit it because it's right in the way for your trip into Hype Bay. At low water, you can see it clearly sticking out. But most of the time, it's just a little bit of wash, and at high water, it's very much under the water. So we need to know what these things are. They are guaranteed questions in the Yachtmaster exam. And as I said, note, at low water, at high water, all of these could well be under the water. Okay. Obviously, rocks are a hazard to safe passage making. And everything we do in nav is safe passage making. It's can we go from A to B safely without problem. And as they are in your exam. There's some others. General has which is a line with a bunch of stripes, with a circle around it, or one like that. Those are pretty much breakers. Pretty much standard on charts. Some of them don't have the problem. Don't want to get involved with them. spoiled areas. Spoiled areas can be anything from somebody dropped something in the water. You want to make sure you're using the latitude scale only. Remember, your longitude gets closer and closer and closer to a convergence point as it goes north or south. So you must use the latitude scale. Obviously, the scale of your chart, the more detail and the smaller the scale, the more accurate your reading can be. Okay, go back to our publications, symbols and abbreviations we've spoken about, lights and signals. This is the Admiralty list of lights and signals for the British Isles and the north coast of France. It details every single maritime light in the water for that area. Okay? Every sound signal that any foghorn, anything will make that's nautical, and all the radio procedures to go in and out of every single port for that area. Okay? You'll notice in this particular one, it's got NP74. That's like a chart number. The South African Navy will have SAN numbers there. You order them like a chart. Okay, it's specific to a region. Well, obviously, because you can't have all the lights of the world in one book. Then you've got notice to mariners. This is an update. So, for instance, a wreck goes down in Table Bay, and we all need to know about it. It will be published in the Notice to Mariners. It's also an NP number or an SAN number that is published for all mariners. It has all your chart updates in it, plus other relevant information that's needed for any changes to charts or marine procedures. Okay, it is relevant to all mariners. Okay, so if Table Bay decide to change their positions of their anchorages, we need to all know about it. It's not just big ships. Okay, next one, tide tables. I think we've all heard of tide tables. Okay, they are specific to a region and a time. So they're dated for that year. They are only valid for that year. I have actually seen somebody do a tidal calculation with the wrong year. It will not work. It will be inaccurate. Okay. And then you get a Nautical Almanac. Now, these are published Nautical Almanacs. They call themselves Nautical Almanacs. They are not government published. They've got a lot of really useful information in them, like updated tide tables, tidal streams, all sorts of really useful information. And they give you, for instance, radio call signs to get into various ports, depths, all sorts of great information. They are very, very useful. They are not official. The official Nautical Almanac, okay, is a celestial almanac. Don't get the two confused. The official Maritime Nautical Almanac is the Nautical Almanac, is actually for celestial use. You can see the guy in the picture here using a sextant. If somebody says to you, you need to carry an official Nautical Almanac, this is what they're talking about. They're not talking about a nice reads information book. Okay, to go with the Nautical Almanac, which is the celestial one, you have to have site reduction tables. It's just calculations. It's basically a book of trigonometry, so you can actually work out where you are. Okay, we've spoken about the IRPCSs, the International Regulation for Prevention of Collision at Sea. Every single vessel at sea should be carrying one. You can actually ask you guys, are we carrying one? Under IMO law, every single marine vessel should carry a prevention, a coal regs, a copy of it. Doesn't matter if it's electronic, as long as they got one on board. And then there are loads and loads and loads and loads. Okay, so LS guides, STCW guides, bridge procedures. We don't need to carry a lot of these, but these are the ones I would assume or expect to see on a yacht sailing in or around Cape Town or slightly further afield. In or around Cape Town, I expect to see that. Slightly further afield, I'd like to see celestial stuff on board. Everybody should have a coal rigs on board. However, there are regulations dependent on where your vessel is registered. So for instance, if you register your vessel in France, you have to carry site reduction tables and a celestial nautical almanac. I have no idea why, but you do. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Little quiz. Okay, see if you can remember it. A rock below low water level has a symbol of. So at chart datum, what symbol does a rock below chart datum, always below water, have? The cross, the star, the square, a dotted line. Okay, where do I check chart symbols? The publish, related symbols and abbreviation, the Admiralty symbols and abbreviation, my other charts, or I just guess them? See some chats coming up here. Yeah, some right answers coming up there. Okay, why would I check my chart scale? Because bigger scales have less detail, because I need to know how long a mile is, nautical mile, and because I could run aground. Why would I want to check my chart scale? This is going to be an interesting one. Oh dear. Okay, so across. Anything below the water at low tide is always going to be across. The published related symbols and abbreviation, they are specific to the charts. And all of the above. Your scale will give you additional detail. The smaller it gets, okay, the scale will be more accurate to give you your nautical mile, the smaller the scale gets. And the more smaller the scale gets, the more detail is on the chart. All of the above. Okay, drawing instruments. Instruments. Okay, first and foremost, guys, please, 2B pencils only. Last time somebody brought an HB on my boat, it got chucked over the side instantly. Never use an HB or a propelling pencil or ink on a chart. Only ever use 2B. Dividers. Guys, these are not to pick your ear, repair your sunglasses, punch holes in belts, anything like that. It just ruins the tip, which then ruins your ability to do proper navigation. I have literally seen somebody picking their ear and then stuck them straight on a chart. I was like, well, no, everybody else has to use that chart. What do you like? You know, really, guys, keep them neatly, keep the ends going. They'll last you a lifetime. The pair in this photograph I have had, they were given to me on my 16th birthday in 1986, and they still work perfectly. Okay, parallel rules. Great things. Nice, accurate. Generally outdated on yachts, but very, very useful for stable surfaces. So if you're navving at home, Really nice, accurate things to use. Lovely things. A Portland plotter, on the other hand, which is what we're looking at here, is a far more useful tool on a yacht. You can use it literally almost in any seas. It does your calculations for you. If you look where I'm moving the mouse now, it does your mathematical calculations for you with your variation and deviation. So there's no maths involved. Very, very useful, easy things to use. If you're going to buy yourself a piece of nav to practice with, Portland plotter is the way to go. Dividers and Portland plotter, you can get around the world. Okay? It is the most commonly used on yachts today, and I don't know one sailing school in the world that don't teach with them. They can show you how to use lovely parallel rules, but we use these because they're just so much easier. Okay, correction tables. If you're going to keep a set of charts going and updated, you're going to need a correction template. Okay? Do you remember we were talking about the notice to mariner in the bottom left-hand corner of a chart? It says the corrections. This is what you use. And then loads of other sort of things on the market today. That, I managed to photograph that upside down, but it's a time, speed, distance calculator. You can get all sorts of little aids. They're quite useful. This one came with a sailing magazine. Quite useful. Chart correction. Very important. Okay. It is published in the Notice to Mariners. And when you buy a new chart, it will have any updates in that bottom left-hand corner like we looked at to start with. It is done only in a fine tip purple ink. That means anybody who picks up your chart can immediately see that the corrections are done. It's a worldwide standard. Okay, and it is only done with a correction table for accuracy. They're cheap. I think they're 15 Rand for a correction table. And they must be done as accurately as possible for obvious reasons. They're a navigational aid. If somebody's put a rock, don't put it half a mile out of place because, well, you're going to hit it. What you can do is if you see bits of purple ink, you can always double check them for yourself if you don't trust them. But that's why they're purple. You can spot them a mile away. Okay. Now specifically put this little bit of purple here around it. Don't get chart corrections confused with TSSs or VTSs, traffic separation schemes or vessel traffic schemes. But it's roughly that color. You'll see a little bit of chart correction done in that color. But those are obvious, very, very obvious. Okay, a little bit of quizzing. Why a 2B pencil? Now, I didn't mention it on purpose. See if you guys can work it out. They're easily erased. It's a soft carbon, graphite. They are softer lead and don't leave permanent depressions on your chart. And they don't leave graphite residue on your chart. It's like propelling pencils do. Okay? So why a 2B pencil? If you see purple on a chart, chart corrections are on my chart. Where do I check if they're correct? List of lights and symbols, list of lights and sounds, Notice to Mariner, or the Nautical Almanac. They look like correct answers coming up. Can I use a normal ruler on my chart? Do I specifically have to use nautical instruments? Or can I use a ruler, measure it, do the best I can? Actually quite a question I get quite often. Getting some correct and some incorrect. Okay, so all of these reasons for using a 2B. It's a soft graphite. Guys, please, when you're using somebody else's chart, don't use a heavy hand on it. Don't push like mad down on it because you just ruin the charts. Charts are around, well, the average chart's around 300 Rand a piece now. Now, if you want to buy them all the time, well, that's your problem. I've got ones that have lasted me for years. Okay, where do I check my corrections? Notice to Mariners. Notice to Mariners gives you your corrections. And yes, you can use any instrument you like on a chart. It doesn't have to be a special nautical one. As long as you can navigate with it, that's fine. It's just easier to use the nautical ones because they're designed for it. Okay, so good timing, almost 10:02. We're just scratching the surface here, guys. I mean, there's so much more detail in these books and these publications and charts and what have you, but it gives you a nice sort of idea of what to look for in a chart, your scale, your depths, what they mean. We'll go into a little bit more detail further down the line in things like mean high water springs, chart datum, that sort of thing, when we start doing some tidal work. You don't need to know any of these symbols and abbreviations other than those three that I told you about, the three rocks, okay? For any exam, you just need to know where to reference them, okay? You don't need to know the list of lights and signals. Again, you just need to know where to reference them. So if an examiner turns around to you and says to you, what lights does that lighthouse have? You're not expected to learn it off by heart, but you are expected to pull out the list of lights and signals for that area and be able to reference it. Okay, for these things, I don't bother with apps because there are so many different chart publishers. So there's no point in having an app that tells you that this is what a rect looks like on that chart, or this is what you don't point. You get what you need for which publisher you're using at the time. So if you're traveling around the States, you know, then you want a US Coast Guard list of symbols and abbreviations. Okay, most of these things come electronically these days. You buy them, download them, you've got them. You know, you can put them on your phone. If you're sailing in South African waters all the time and using South African charts, just get the South African Navy list of lights and signals and the symbols and abbreviations, stick it on a phone, and then you've got it on board all the time. Just make sure when you throw your phone over the side, you've got a copy on board. Okay, I use a Portland plotter and dividers more than any other navigational tool these days. If I'm using a chart, Portland plotter and dividers. So if you want to do some practicing and you're going to go buy one, you can get them at pretty much any decent chandlery. They will sell them as a kit, usually with a Portland plotter and a divider. And because they're all packed in China, they'll stick an HP pencil in just to annoy every skipper. Okay. So that's about, yeah, spot on. Before we go into questions, I'll come back to this. So next week, we'll do a little bit more chart work. What's dead reckoning? Estimate a position, including an awareness of leeway. Techniques of visual fixing, satellite-derived positions, use of waypoints, and waypoints is to create a course that you can then sail to, therefore course to steer. If you want to do a little bit of reading beforehand, anything on leeway. Leeway seems to confuse everyone for some reason, but we will go through it next week. Anything on dead reckoning. Again, this seems to be one that confuses a lot of people. I don't know why. And then course to steer versus course steered. It's a slightly different way of calculating one or the other. So let's go back to any questions while we're here. Anybody who wants to ask any questions, we're running nicely on time for once. I'm trying to just expand so I can see no faces.
Dave, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, who am I talking to?
Simon Holland.
Hi, Simon.
This was session 4, and next week is session 6.
Have I just done the wrong number? Sorry, I will change that.
Just asking.
Well, there's no real particular order that they have to go in,
Okay.
except the last couple. We can do tides first, or we'll do that. But we'll do that one next week because it's kind of what we're following with. We've mentioned what we're going to do, so good. I'll change that to session 5.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
We're the only ones who've used these, so I probably used that as session 6 when I was doing it with my Bermuda crew.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
If I've got any skippers out there, I can see Alan Hafley there, I can see Vita there. Do both of you have a coal rigs on board?
Yes, I've got.
Have you got one, Alan? Vita?
And Vito?
Have you got a coal rigs on board?
Yes, and Vito, has he got?
I don't know, he's not answering.
Yes, I definitely have. Has Alan got a boat? Thanks, Dave. It was useful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, an absolute pleasure, guys. I mean,
Well done, Dave. Very nice. Very good.
there should be some useful information for you more senior chaps.
True.
Alan,
Very true.
Alan only knows how to switch on his chart plotter, that's all. This is all new to him.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Much appreciated,
Pleasure.
No, that's great, guys. That's great. Well done.
Not one question about all those boring documents. That's quite surprising.
Where did you get that cigarette?
On the packet. On the packet in front of me. You're jealous. I was saying to the guys, I bought enough to go around the world, so I came home with them. I can do one better, though.
Vito, we should have a drink now. What do you think?
Here we go. Have one of them. What is this now? The end of Wavy's presentation, and it becomes club's drinks time, does it, Alan?
I thought that would be a good idea, but you've got to be able to raise your glass, you know.
You have one.
Wavy, can I ask you a question quickly? How was your trip, the Clip Around the World race? Did you have a good time?
It's hard work, Vita. It's really hard work. I mean, I enjoyed the racing, and I enjoyed the, the course is excellent, and crossing the ocean. Some of them that I hadn't crossed before were great, but it's not for the faint-hearted. I'll tell you that much. To go out and sort of take 20-odd novices across the Southern Ocean, it's quite testing at times, but really good fun though. I mean, and the people are great. You know, the people who run it and the people who are involved, they tend to be really, really good. I could recommend it to anybody who just feels like getting fit and doing something a bit wild, even just one leg. But it is quite costly. It's all in pounds, you know. Better off trying to get yourself onto a nice Cape to Rio crew or something. Crossing an ocean is one of the nicest things I think you can do. I mean, you probably agree with that, Vita.
Yeah, good fun. Yeah, but not where you went, down south and around the Horn, and that must have been hectic.
It gets bumpy. It gets bumpy. We got hit by, coming up the east coast of Australia, we were hit by one of the southerly busters. And the wind speed went from 7 knots to 87 in 3 minutes.
Wow.
And it was actually quite ironic. We couldn't see it coming because it was at the time when all the Australian fires were on. So we were in restricted visibility because of the smoke coming off the mainland. You couldn't see half a mile in front of the boat because of the smoke.
Sure. Sounds hectic.
Right, it was great fun. I don't think the crew were too happy about dragging down.
Australia.
Sorry, Vita, you said?